Good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Best Practices for Developing End-to-End Cloud-Powered Medical Devices. My name is Sonia Hunt, and it's my pleasure to be your X Talks moderator for today. Today's webinar is a lively discussion that will run for approximately 60 minutes. This presentation also includes a Q&A session with our speakers. This webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speakers throughout this presentation by using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. Now, this chat box is located in the control panel, which is found on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require any assistance, please contact me at any time by sending a message using this chat panel. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please note that this event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. Now it's my pleasure to pass the mic to our moderator for today's event, and he is John Miller, Vice President Americas at BioTE. So John, when you're ready, you may begin.
Great, thank you, Sonia. How are you? So, hey everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. This actually is the third in a series of thought leadership webinars that BioTE has been hosting along with our global partners as we try to add to the ecosystem of modern medical devices. So the first one addressed the changing AAMI guidance on cloud change control, also known as TIR 115. We also did one on the new FDA cybersecurity guidance. So those are available on our website. And this one is looking to take continue on that strategic thread and look at a comprehensive view of the topics and best practices to consider when you're building medical devices and systems that leverage the cloud. So we purposely called this session Best Practices because we always know there are a number of items to weigh when you're making a decision about your product, about your company, and your overall market strategy. So what we're going to try to do is walk around the general areas of systems architecture as one carry. Where do I put functions and why? Look at the issues of how do you consider aspects of your product roadmap when you're trying to weigh MVP decisions or long-term strategies. There's also the very, very critical things around your economics related to your device system and company. So how do you look at that from a pre-market perspective, but also with the ever more critical aspects of post-market? And then also, how do you keep a lens on the market and the demands that come from regulatory organizations, from your customers, and also in many cases, obviously, the competition that you have in your sector. So we've built an agenda along those lines, and there'll be topics of discussion that we'll go through, and we'll give points of view from our team. As a reminder, Sonia said up front, if you've got questions, please put them into the question section of the webinar controls. We have some time allocated at the end for Q&A. We'll answer them there, and what we'll also do is follow up with any that we don't have the time to do that. So in order to kind of get through these broad and strategic topics, there are two experts that are going to be on the panel with me today. Number one, Daniel Adler is the CEO and co-founder of BioTE Medical. BioTE is a provider of infrastructure for medical device clouds. And Adam Jacobs joins us from Sunrise Lab. He's the CTO there, and their company brings design and engineering talent to medical device companies to help them come from a concept into a commercialized device or system. So I'm glad to have them here and give their perspectives on cloud platforms, product development, and medical devices themselves from their background. So why don't we jump right in? So the first topic that we have as a topic of discussion is, okay, well, what are some of the fundamentals that need to be considered when looking at things? So why don't we start there? So Daniel, let me give it to you. So what is a cloud-powered medical device, and why should this approach even be considered?
So first of all, hi everyone, John, Adam, and great having you here. And before talking about what is a cloud-powered medical device, I'll just explain also through the difference of what is a connected device to what is cloud-powered medical device. And when talking about connected devices, basically we are talking about basic functions of such as transmitting device and patient data from a device in a secured manner, mainly towards third-party systems like remote patient monitoring tools or EHRs. So the cloud, in that case, if it's used basically for a secure storage and data transfer means. When talking about cloud-powered medical devices, so basically there are two layers. First one is when the cloud acts as what is called MDDS, a medical device data system, and covers functions which are around managing patients, managing users and devices, managing the customers if it's care providers or distributors, and then supporting basic use cases for data presentation or transmission, like remote patient monitoring, over-the-air updates if it's for device management or for cybersecurity updates, handling reimbursement capabilities and reports, and even things around post-market surveillance. These are all eventually translated to the ability to drive regulated devices and support customer and user operation. The second layer is when basically the cloud is becoming part of the medical device. We call it cloud in a medical device. And this is when the cloud is being used also to run algorithms or sophisticated workflows and capabilities like alerts and even patient engagement functions, which can be around adherence management, questionnaires, and so on. Which basically translates to better clinical insights and better patient outcomes. And in this case, of course, it's another layer that can be added, and the cloud becomes part of the medical device. So basically, once you decided that you want to use the cloud either for the first reason or for the second one, then you can start enjoying from the full capabilities of the cloud. And the idea over here is to try and offload as much as possible capabilities from the device to the cloud, where the ideal situation would be, of course, if the device itself is mainly interacts with the patient body and around sensing it or managing it, or providing therapeutic capabilities to it or diagnostics ones. And then the rest is to exchange mainly raw data, but also structured data to the cloud. And on the cloud side, you can talk about responsibilities like, activation of the device, authentication, storing and analyzing data, managing the device, collaborating with ecosystem players, even bringing code of and algorithms of third-party tools, sharing data, and of course, exchanging data and workflows with EHRs, EDCs, QMSs, all of that can be done through the cloud. And even capabilities, and we'll talk about it later on in the session in one of the parts, around cybersecurity management. The cloud is an excellent tool for doing that. Of course, alongside of the basic stuff of compute power and storage power that is being used with the cloud itself. So as much as you can load to the cloud is better. And basically, I think that the most interesting part is what kind of benefits the cloud can provide you when you're talking about cloud-powered medical devices. And I would like to touch that point through some examples showcasing the benefits of the cloud by giving some medical device companies examples that are using the cloud heavily or very interestingly. So I'll touch several use cases. The first one is around cost optimization and reduction. And once again, you can use the cloud. You can make the device itself as simple as possible, or I would call it as dumb as possible, and try to offload as much as possible to the cloud, run algorithms there instead of on the device, and so on and so forth. So edge device hardware versus cloud hardware or software comparison. So one example is a company called Natera. They developed a sensor that actually through radar sits over the bed of a patient and knows how to monitor vital signs like heart rate and respiration rate. But all it does is sending the raw data from the radar to the cloud, where the algorithms of detecting the heart rate and respiration rate are basically conducted on the cloud itself. So the device can be very cost effective and very easy to manage. And more than that, they added capabilities and features around bed occupancy and other features that they introduced down the road just by adding algorithms to the cloud. So the cost efficiency is not only on the product development and BOM side, but also on the ongoing operation and add-on of capabilities. So that's one example when talking about cloud computing to reduce costs on the edge side. Two more examples. One company called Zilia from Canada. They are doing a retina image analysis. And also over there, because the images are quite heavy, video and stills, offloading them to the cloud and then running GPUs of NVIDIA or others to process them makes it more efficient and reduces dramatic cost from the device side and makes them easier to develop and manage. Other examples where you can use the cloud more intensively is by introducing new business models. So also here a few examples of changing charging models and transferring it to business model like pay-per-use or subscription. There is a US company called Bloom Life. They developed pregnancy monitoring system for high-risk pregnancies. And they are relying on remote patient monitoring CPT codes, and they are doing a rev share model with clinics. So basically, by enabling clinic to remotely monitor their patients, they're introducing another revenue stream and being able to share that with their customers. One more example, a company called Softwave doing derma devices for clinics. They were selling in the past capital equipment, devices for derma cosmetics. They introduced a website where you can actually buy pulses. You buy 5,000 pulses, 10,000 pulses, and you charge them into the device through the website purchasing process, and then it's basically sells as packages, and they moved from capital equipment expense to or selling to a subscription or a package selling model. And there are many other examples around that. And we do have some more sophisticated examples of companies that are going to improve the patient outcome routes, which are a bit more difficult today, but they exist when it comes to reimbursement capabilities, where you can actually improve patient outcome by collecting mass amounts of data in the cloud and then analyzing it and offer more unique and dedicated treatments for patients. And one example here is a company called Theranica. They are doing a migraine therapy and neuromodulation treatment. And basically, through the cloud, they are actually engage with patient, ask them for questions around how they felt before the treatment, after the treatment. They've built one of the largest databases in the world for understanding why migraines happen. And through that, they are able to introduce new features, new capabilities, which are more optimized to specific patients and improve patient outcomes. And there are more and more examples around that, data sharing capabilities and so on around the cloud. I guess we won't have time to get into all of those details today.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, you can affect both the operating model, the business model, but also the patient engagement, patient therapy model very directly. So, and there was a question I was asked if we can follow up on these use cases more individually if you have any questions on that. But let me transition. So, Adam, that really showed a picture of the endless possibilities with the cloud, but in some regards, there's a device in the mix, and in some regards, how all this relates to considerations of the device platform and hardware and software architecture considerations. Can you share a point of view from that view?
Sure. I mean, maybe the first viewpoint I want to share is that you really don't want the tail to wag the dog either. This is a medical device. and clinicians and people, are living in the trenches. They're providing medical care, and it's the medical device part of it that really has to be the most important focus on this. And when connectivity can certainly enhance that, and so we look for ways that are useful to everybody in the ecosystem. So looking at it from the perspective of the device, and just by way of a little bit of introduction, is that so the reason that we're here today is because Sunrise Labs is about a 100-person medical device engineering company. We see 20 to 30 projects a year. We've been around 30 years. We've seen a lot of medical product development, and we've been doing connected devices almost 10 years now. So we've seen the pros and cons. We've seen the advantages and the disadvantages of having connectivity and the evolution of all that. So we're just really thankful to be in a place that we get to see all that and bring the kind of vision of that to you. And it's not all positive. There's things that certainly have to be thought of and balanced. So in terms of the architecture of the device itself, in general, we're trying to build the simplest device you can, like Daniel said, and sometimes that's a minimum viable product, and you would architect it to have the capabilities that you need to be able to expand in the future. And so some of that, if that's algorithmic, for example, and you're doing things that might have things that you really can't do in a device, uploading it to the cloud is a good thing. On the other hand, you are making the device more complex in different ways. For example, there's a question about what should be processed on the device and what goes into the cloud. And so, historically, you would do everything on the device. And, one of the advantages of doing things on the device is that it really keeps it sort of, in a way, it keeps it more simpler from the perspective of being able to have a device that doesn't have to have as much connectivity requirements. For example, if you have a mobile device that's not plugged into the wall or connected on Wi-Fi, you might want to do data compression by, for example, doing signal or image processing on the device and then sending up features or an answer. And it depends very much on what the device does. Again, the clinicians want answers very quickly. So if you delay by a second by having connectivity, that's a problem sometimes. So, and sometimes it doesn't matter at all. So it very much depends on architecting it in a way that the application is optimized. So another thing that you have to really think about is what's the real value of the connectivity and the data, and to whom? The clinicians, again, are trying to practice medicine. They care less about your business model and the things that might help you, like being able to optimize your machine learning algorithms. They really want to, get an actionable answer. So, keeping in mind that being connected can very much help that. Getting an actionable answer might be really enhanced by being connected, having more processing power up in the cloud, having more inputs that you don't have from a hospital information system, maybe in a classifier. So there can be some real advantages, but there's also the opposite side of it, which is you don't want to flood them with data. So you might want to simplify it, the whole thing. So Daniel covered some of the positives in terms of being connected. Like a clinician monitoring is just greatly enhanced, and then you have to balance that in a way that you have to design your user interface to be able to be multidimensional. Like you've got a clinician interface, you've got a patient interface, and so that kind of user interfaces can be further, better optimized for the different sets of users, and that's a good thing. The other thing that's really good for is monitoring compliance. So you might have, for example, in a not connected device, you might have data that you'd have to go and download every now and then to see if the patient's using it, for example, or if it's something like a home device, but you get that automatically when you're connected. And one of the just all the data is really positive for like I said, if you are going to improve your algorithms. But you remember that usability is an important part of medical device. So user studies are done, and you look for user mistakes or that can lead to reduced safety and efficacy. And you can monitor that with it when you have a connected device. You can look at the user interactions and see what is effective, what kind of mistakes people make, and that can be a critical thing on a medical device. It's considered just as important as the clinical efficacy of it.
Well, you know, Adam,
course,
that kind of blends a little bit into the next topic. So, I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is don't lose sight of what the device is there to do and the people that are using it, right? So in some regards, if you want to maybe continue on that thread and go into anything that might get around the concept of broader design excellence and also how you really keep an eye on user experience.
Yes, I mean it's so critical. I mean, you know, the user experience part is really interesting because as we've all, you know, living in this world nowadays, one of the things that we see all the time is gamification. So patient compliance is a really big issue in all medicine, and of course, you know, being able to monitor compliance is helpful, but being able to motivate the patient to do better is something that you can do in real time. You can have incentives and you can change incentives and you can try incentives because you're now interacting just like you interact with Google. You can interact with the medical device companies, have those tools at their disposal to try to engage you, and that could be a positive thing. You know, in terms of other design things to think about. Like I was saying, it does, having connectivity can both increase and decrease complexity. You can have a very simple device sometimes that does something. I mean, it's a thermometer, let's say, you know, and a connected thermometer has a lot more complexity. It has to be able to talk to Bluetooth. It has to talk to Wi-Fi. Maybe a cell phone in it. It has a user interface that has to be set up. So there's layers of complexity, and so you have to balance those things, and you might be adding, you know, in general, if you have lots of different kinds, if you really want to have connectivity, if you have lots of different kinds of connectivity, like I said, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, maybe a cell phone, that requires an increased level of processing power and memory and operating system complexity on the phone itself. You can imagine how a thermometer would be pretty easy, and then a connected thermometer would be. And many of the people come to us who want to monitor things. We've made a connected thermometer, and so it's you know, we see some of that. One of the things you have to think about a lot is battery life. Battery life is always a major concern, especially we do connected implanted devices, and battery life is the main limitation of an implanted device. But wearables or even a desktop unit, if it's a battery operated device. Connectivity is often the most power hungry part of the device. Sometimes you can go to Bluetooth Low Energy, and that's why I talked about, you know, reducing the amount of data that you're sending so that you're not burdening the system, and that'll increase your device lifetime if it's, for example, like an implantable device. So those are things that you really have to think about when you're making those balances. Another thing that's, you know, in the usability part of it, remember that you could have all this data, and data is only useful to a clinician as it's actionable. So the last thing they want to do is be part of a patient monitoring cycle. You know, you've been to hospitals, you've heard the alarms go off, the nurse runs in, turns the patient monitor alarm off and runs out. So false alarms and, you know, alarm fatigue is something to really watch out for. So from a user interface perspective, be really diligent about making sure that you have the most concentrated and actionable information being passed to clinicians and your patients. From a company perspective, you know, that matters as well, because you have to have the infrastructure to deal with all that data. And so you might be getting data that, you know, you end up not really using. But then if you get, you'll learn how to be creative and use it. For example, a lot of applications that we work on are involved with either algorithm development or machine learning. And the machine learning data is, it's all about the availability of data, except it's not all about that. It's also about having something that has a gold standard attached to it. So when you go into a clinical device, a clinical study, you'll have a gold standard, and that gold standard might be, say, a lab result, and so you can look at your result, compare it to the lab result, and then use it for machine learning. That's how machine learning works. But some applications you don't have that when you're remote. You just have all this flood of data. You don't know what it actually is. So, but some certain applications do have that. So, for example, if you're gathering ECG data, you can have a panel of clinicians look at it and after the fact annotate it and decide what it's used. So again, it depends very much on the application about the value of that data. So maybe two other things that are worth mentioning is that you'll have intermittent connectivity sometimes. You'll have, if you're, for example, at home, or even if it's a home device, or a portable device, you will have intermittent connectivity. Somebody goes hiking and they're out of range. So that means you have to operate in two different modes. You have to have a not connected way to operate and a connected way to operate. And in clinical environments that are say intensive care units and operating rooms, you need instantaneous results. You can't wait for things. So being able to operate in two different modes is important, and then you have to resynchronize your data. And that's an important thing, is to build your software in a way that is sort of like a transaction system where you're operating independently, and then you transact and you get synchronized. And there's the other side of it, which is you can have a lab, a piece of equipment in a piece of lab. It's wired up to the internet. Connectivity is just not a problem. Power is not a problem, and it's great because now you can look at the you can look at the use of reagents. You can look at maintenance questions, whether you can do preemptive maintenance, and there's all kinds of benefits to that. Surgical robots is really using it a lot nowadays. Part of that is people are talking about hasn't really gotten to the point of remote operation, but there's certainly remote involvement. People will help to just like typically you'll have a big piece of equipment like that, and you'll have an engineer from the robotics company sometimes in the room. Well, now that can be done remotely. So there's lots of ways that it impacts your medical device, and I would say that it's really about thinking through where the value is, what it does, make sure that it's a positive value for your users, make sure that it's not increasing your, getting you off your MVP, and then really amplifying the places where it brings you that value, and using that to its fullest.
Yeah, and I think that transitions into the next topic, which is this concept of weighing decisions now, but not basically boxing yourself into a corner for the future. Because in some regards, you're exactly right. You never want to lose sight of your intended use, the clinical domain that you're trying to serve, and the setting that it's going to be foundationally done. But the reality is things change, right? So one of the points is really, how do you try to look into the process of building adaptability into your foundational architecture, and then introducing things as things go. So maybe Daniel, why don't you comment a bit? I think we've got some experience with clients who sort of looked across many lenses, both from, candidly, those things around just regulatory requirements to business grows and scalability. So maybe you can comment there.
Yes, so there are many key points, to take into consideration when going for the cloud. And I would start from the first point. Although you're starting from an MVP, you always need to look on the end game. What you want to achieve at the end. We see many medical device companies that just walk one step after the other, and basically say, okay, we have now some R&D development we need to do. We need to run some dashboards or BI capabilities. Let's use Grafana and use some basic cloud capabilities. And after that, let's see. And then they move to the second phase of clinical studies, and they're just adding another capability, another feature. And then it becomes something which is cumbersome and difficult to manage, and they're basically very stuck and cannot scale it further. And all the investment that they did basically goes down the drain. So basically, when you're starting, it's okay to start in steps, but think about the end game and how you get there and how you build it gradually. So that's the first point. The second point, which also relates to that, is make sure that you're building it in an adaptable way, meaning that think about the architecture that you're building in a way that you are for sure not predicting all the use cases and all the things that you will encounter down the road about who are your customers, what kind of features you would like to have in your device, and et cetera, et cetera. So think always about any feature in a way that you're not building it one-off, but more like in a generic way. Now, let's drill down a bit more specifically to actual points. First one is how you connect to the cloud. You have many ways to do that. And it's basically setting dependent. You know, if you are in a hospital, it's one thing. If you're in a clinic, it's another thing. And if you're at home, it's a different thing. In general, when you're talking about connectivity, you have two main items you need to consider as pros and cons. One is how costly is this way to connect, and second, how complex is it to connect in this way, meaning configurability. And then let's drill down to the options. One option is, which is quite common, is to connect directly with the device through Wi-Fi, and then basically it's cheap, it doesn't cost you anything, but you need to configure it. Another thing is cellular. It costs you the subscription and the monthly fee, but you don't need to configure anything. Once you, especially today with the eSIMs and everything, once it's coming as part of the device, you just plug it in or activate it, and you are connected to the cloud. Saves a lot of hassle, you know, especially if you have untrained people that don't know how to operate well complex devices or any device that can be there. And at the same time, you need to make sure that with respect to the setting, you have the coverage. So you don't have always Wi-Fi everywhere, or you don't have always cellular connectivity everywhere. So that's something you should also take into consideration. And another way to connect is non-direct, through gateways. The most common gateway is a cellular phone. So your mobile phone is being used as a gateway, and then, as Adam mentioned, you're using normally BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy, to connect to the mobile phone, and from there the mobile phone acts as a gateway. So the cons are that you need to install an app, and again, configuration, connect to the Bluetooth at least one time to do this operation. Later on, it might be seamless, but the benefits is that it doesn't cost you anything. You don't need to put a physical gateway that costs more money. So all of those needs to take into account once you are considering on connecting to the cloud. And there are many other elements around this point. There, by the way, battery is definitely a key one, because Wi-Fi and cellular are consuming more than BLE. And also in cellular, you have different type of cellular, low energy cellular, and so on. So you need to be really focused on what you need to do. The other item that you need to look at is cybersecurity and privacy. But in this case, you need to treat the cloud as your friend rather than your enemy. I see also many meta companies saying we will get to the cloud only later. We want to pass FDA approvals or compliance without the cloud because it introduces risks. And after we do that, we move to the cloud. I'm a bit biased, but it's on the contrary, because the cloud enables you to cope better with cybersecurity requirements, especially the new ones, because basically with the cloud, you can now apply over-the-air updates. You can manage better the vulnerability and updatability of features. You can do things like single sign-on and certifications and encryption end-to-end, which are much more secure than doing it only on the device side. So the cloud has a lot of benefits that you need to consider when it comes to cybersecurity. You just need to learn about it and make sure that you're using the right tools and infrastructure in place to make sure it's secured, but at the end of the day, it will be more secure than just using a not connected device, because eventually any electronic device is a connected device, and we'll talk also about it in the next topic. The second point, when it comes to privacy and also cybersecurity, but how do you now handle all the different regulation and compliance aspects that are coming from the care providers? So it also depends on geography. So in some cases, care providers in Europe are asking for ISO 27001 as compliance, to security. In the US, it's mainly SOC 2, and now moving to HITRUST. So you need to be aware of the different elements that can come up with cybersecurity requirements from this side, and make sure that you have a plan on how to address them and support them. Last point with respect to privacy and cybersecurity is where you deploy your solution. Cloud, basically, it's not a real cloud in the sky. It's physical locations that the big vendors have. Amazon has like almost 30 different physical locations on the globe, and some countries require you to keep patient information in the physical geographies themselves of the countries. So you need to make sure that you have good solutions in place to address those issues. So if you are working in China, you should deploy in AWS Beijing. If you are working in the US, you have many options. Like North Carolina and other places, or Virginia. And if you're working in Europe, so also there you have Ireland, Frankfurt, and other places as well. I know that we don't have much time, so I'll just quickly say some 2 more points. One is about scalability. Make sure that you are using auto-scale capabilities of the cloud infrastructure, so you grow as you need seamlessly with more and more devices, but also if you are reducing the usage, you scale down to reduce cost. That's critical. Availability, make sure that if your device is a critical device, then you are doing a high availability architecture. And if it's not, save money and work with the regular infrastructure, which is quite robust. And there are other topics that we will not be able to cover, like interoperability and how you connect to EHR systems, and so on and so on. So just in a nutshell about that.
So the primary vectors around those things that are affecting the regulatory considerations of your device, those things which affect the operational controls, let alone just not losing sight of what the device is there to do in the first place. Right. So just if you can keep those primary vectors, with that though, you spread a pretty wide horizon. So Adam, when a client comes to you with an idea and they're looking to a commercialized path, how do you look at the consideration of what's the MVP, or how do you set the main variables around the architecture considerations? Is there any perspective of bringing it back to the next release as you look forward for adaptability?
Yeah, John, that's a very common thing for us.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think I liked your slide of the MVP and the vision, because you really have to accommodate both. You can't ask people to build something and then throw it away and have it be have it be a complete redo. So I think the biggest issue that I see with the MVP is discipline. It's really hard for people to, because they're out in sort of sell mode to try to make their device be either with investors or with clinicians, and they're trying to tout how all the great things it's going to do, but there's really usually some essential function that makes it special. And I think being able to give up or to delay, I would say, some of those things that are nice and useful, and not even more than that. Sometimes they're great, but there's an essential thing that makes your medical device special, and that's the thing that people they're going to want to use it for. So I think it's really discipline of the balancing between kind of the selling side of this and making it really tailored for actual use, because those are serial activities. People will go out and they have to sell, investors, they have to sell clinicians, they have to sell all kinds of people on this, and then it shows up on the doorstep, and now people have to use it.
Yeah.
So I think that if you keep that in mind, then you're halfway there. But there's lots of architectural things that we do. You know, at Sunrise, we really like to think, you know, sort of at the kind of holistic perspective, and that includes the users and the way it's going to be implemented, you know, in the environments, but also how it works together as a complete system. So just from a hardware and a software perspective, you would look at all those dreams and visions of the long-term hopes for it, and you would say, okay, how can we architect this so that the things that we are designing now don't have to be changed, so that you can evolve into those functionalities. So you might, for example, say, okay, you might even say, we don't want to be connected, like you said, Daniel. Maybe we want to be not connected now and get on the market, you know, as soon as possible, and we'll save a few months by being or whatever they think, but we want to be able to turn the switch pretty easily. So you have to build in, you know, the communications methodologies and all the software in there, but then, you know, then you can flip a switch. And another thing is just being able to, you know, in terms of functionality, it's not all about connectivity. You know, in a medical device, people have, say, treatment modalities, and so you might have, or sensing, you might want to start not being able to monitor your whole system, but then later evolve into monitoring your whole system so you can do predictive maintenance. So, you know, building in those hooks, and then it's an iteration, but it's not a redo. And I think that's the main thing, is the discipline to know what's MVP, the vision to know where you want to go, and then the architecture to build it in so that it ends up being as painless as possible to implement it.
Yeah, don't ever lose the factor of asking yourself, so what and how is it special, right? At the end of the day, the MVP needs to be meaningful, but the idea is, as long as you know where you're going from a vision standpoint, you can set lanes in your architecture that you design through, right, an MVP, because I think that's an important thing. You know, Daniel, one thing in a topic point, a lot of this issue of cloud and et cetera, you know, there's kind of a shifting sand and changes in a positive way, I should say, shifting about everything related to the new guidelines, privacy considerations, how you work on all aspects there. Can you give any insight of sort of navigating that process and some of the things that are sort of the high level aspects of best practice?
Yeah, so this is a hot topic, and we discussed this in our previous webinar, and it continues to roll and change, and FDA is constantly modifying some of it. So maybe first, let's understand what a cyber device is. The FDA defines it based on the latest guidance, and basically they say that any device that has software or even only firmware and has some comms interfaces, communication interfaces, that can be a serial interface or a USB interface, they are considered as cyber devices, and hence they need to be protected, and you need to submit as part of your FDA submission the plan on how you are going to treat vulnerabilities and do threat assessment and so on and so forth. So that you should know, you know, once talking about what is a cyber device, and that's regardless to the cloud or not to the cloud. Once you understand that, then again, we believe that the cloud becomes a major tool here to actually comply with the regulations and enable you to handle in the best way, in the proper way, cyber devices. So basically, what does it mean? We're talking about vulnerability and monitoring updates, monitoring the situation and updating it and so on. Basically, the main things that you need to cover is that you need to showcase that you are doing vulnerability assessment and vulnerability management. It's being done through threat modeling, conducting active things like penetration testing and code scans. You need to demonstrate that cybersecurity measures are in place, things like authentication mechanism. I mentioned earlier, single sign-on, two-way certification, encryption, both in transit and in rest, and other mechanisms like application firewalls. you need to showcase that your architecture is robust and compliant with the requirements. And then you need to show how you are managing vulnerabilities, because eventually you will find vulnerabilities, or someone will find vulnerabilities. And that's, basically how you manage your SBOM, software bill of material, and how you will manage your updatability plan. So once you identified a threat and you need to, and it's a critical one or a major one, then how do you basically update it in a timely manner? And again, here the cloud comes as an enabler, because you can do it almost instantly. You detect the threat, you can actually use the cloud for scanning all the vulnerabilities all the time on your SBOM, and connect to online databases. And then once you detect a vulnerability and you get alerted on it, you can fix it and then apply and deploy through the over-the-air update, the patch, and make sure that you are compliant with the regulation. So basically, I think cloud enables you to handle most, if not all, of the cybersecurity regulation requirements, and actually go better with them. When it comes to privacy matters, it's a bit different. You have, of course, again, it's region specific. You have the HIPAA and GDPR. So basically, we talked about the fact that you need to address it on a local basis. Here, I want to focus a bit about what is called personal healthcare information, and how you need to look at that. So basically, again, from our experience and our view, you should look at almost any, not all, but a lot of the different aspects of the data that you manage as potential FI data types or data attributes. And what do I mean? It's not only the name of the patient and his date of birth or his place of residence, but it can be also a serial number of a device that is attached to him and he's constantly using. Anything that can actually identify him in some kind of a manner. So you need to make sure that you are using the infrastructure that enables you to de-identify and anonymize any data type and any attribute that might be relevant to FI, and not just specific ones. Basically, again, be ready to multiple situations, because the regulations, again, in China or Canada and US are different with respect to what is considered as private information and how you can share it. And also another point which is important is that not only on your main infrastructure, on your cloud infrastructure where you are managing and collecting the data, you need to make sure that you are complying with that, but also on third-party tools that you are using. So a lot of, once you're exchanging data, and it can be like even, operational data about a bug that you have, and now someone sends, opens a ticket, and he attaches a log file from the system that might contain FI information. It's okay if the log file contains FI information, but you need to make sure that it transits only in places which are protected and can carry personal healthcare information. So be careful using, things like Slack or others if you are not using their infrastructure, which is protecting FI. So these are another important points to stress out.
So I guess
John,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, John, there's something I want to add. Daniel brought up a topic before of different levels of connectivity, of making the cloud part of your actual medical device. It's been a typical thing that we've been doing, is we will often separate. Let me back up. What the FDA regulates is the safety and efficacy of a medical device, and the whole framework is under the risk reduction part of it. So if you add these things that are going to potentially affect safety and efficacy, they become part of the medical device. So one of the ways that your architect, to try to the architect system to try to reduce those interdependencies is we will take the performance and safety and efficacy related part, like say the therapeutic part of it, and we'll put that in something that's maybe a class C or class B kind of processors that are running, and they're doing that, and they're sometimes, and we'll isolate them from the user interface and the connectivity portion of it. So, and basically the person who has to filter, the side of the side of the processors that has to decide what's safe to use is on the safety and efficacy side. So those might be safety processors. They might be, tight loop things. They're locked down much more. On the user interface side, the connectivity side, you can do a lot more because they're limited into how they will affect the safety and efficacy by being filtered by those by that side of it, the processor that side of it. So that's an important distinction to make. Now, if you decide to open up, your safety and efficacy part of it onto the cloud, then you're including that whole chain into it. So the simpler thing to do is to separate them. If the benefits are doable, then you'll open it up, knowing that now you have to make that whole cloud infrastructure part of your medical device. The good news is that that's becoming more developed, more common, and people are trying to do that now. In previous years, we really kept them pretty far apart, and as this field develops and the FDA becomes more comfortable with it, that's getting more and more done, and the guidelines are more and more involved in that. And this is all part of it. All the cybersecurity guidelines and all the privacy guidelines are all geared towards enabling that more and more as time. But it's an evolving field.
Yeah, in fact, that's just in terms of little clock management, but also that's a good segue. There was a question that was asked. Maybe Daniel, I can throw this at you. With this idea, and a lot of things is getting through your approval hurdles. So when you're integrating cloud, what are some of the aspects to consider relative to your FDA submission, your CE mark strategy, and to the notifying bodies? What are some of the considerations there?
So basically, it really depends. Again, just putting an aspect, I'm not a regulatory expert, so it's all based on the experience that we have with our customers, and you should go and consult with regulatory people to give you the right advice here. But from our experience, it really depends, on what you're doing with the cloud. So if you're only using it to transfer, store, and convert, formats and display medical device data, then all of that falls under what is called Medical Device Data System, MDDS, and then the definition of that by the FDA, and then you only need to basically do something like a self-declaration. It should be part of the submission. It's good enough, and yeah, you should split, the strategy of what you're submitting first and what you're doing next, and it can come in a later stage. But in case you're running algos or decisions on the cloud that impact the outcome, like with the Netira example, then the cloud is part of the medical device regular submission, and they should come together. Okay, so that's basically how to respond to that. And again, I repeat on the point of the cybersecurity part. These days, you need to submit anyhow a plan on how you are handling cybersecurity. And that's regardless if you're already submitting also the cloud as part of it or not. Okay, so that's another point.
So let me guess, there's some things BioT has that'll actually help accelerate that process. Does that need to be said?
Of course, yeah.
Another question, actually, Adam, this is for you. It's kind of like a multi-part question. One, your MVP question stimulated it. Should we build connectivity ourselves? What I think this idea of what do you we asked the question, Bill, what do you build? What's a platform, et cetera? The other question is where does the build part around connectivity come in? How do you look at first-time medical devices for an MVP? Where do you draw those lines?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we've been doing this for about 10 years, and for many years we would build from scratch the whole infrastructure, and so it was a costly and time-consuming thing, and for years, honestly, John, I was looking for you guys for years. I didn't, we want to focus on the medical device. We did all that work. It was great work. There's a lot of customization, and it was a real hurdle. And having somebody who we could use as a platform or software as a service to be able to, that's evolving. It's really the focus of your business. We thought about going into the business, and we said that's a different business. than what we're in. We want somebody focused on that and constantly evolving their platform, constantly being involved in monitoring it. So, but what does happen is that there's parts of that you get as the infrastructure, and then there's parts of it that you're going to want for your individual workflow, your individual device. There's going to be specialty reports. There's going to be interactions that you'll want. So, I think of this as kind of a platform that you don't have to do by yourself, and you can focus more on the customization and the important things that make you special, because that's what makes you special. And I think that's it doesn't mean that what I would say is that we deal with big companies as well and small companies. Big companies often just they want to own it. They want to own the infrastructure. They don't want the risk of working with other companies and the dependencies. And Johnson & Johnson and Medtronic, they can go out and do it. Drug companies, they can do it. But many people do decide to do it still. But I think it's more and more, and I've always believed that it's more and more going in the way of this is something that you go out and you build on that platform.
Yeah,
just like the cloud. We built the cloud interactions, the hardware ourselves at first.
Yeah, I think the idea is if you've been around long enough to know where computer systems started, you don't need to write the operating system. You don't need to create the database. At the end of the day is choose the right platform perspective that you're going to add value, right?
Well, so one of the things I tell people in the is focus your company, especially in startup companies, focus your company on what makes you special, and try. You don't want to become a power supply company. You don't want to be. So focus as much as you can on what makes you special, and really make that the core of your internal expertise.
And I have to add here that also for big companies, we see it quite often, and recently more and more. They're building one-off solutions because they have the resources, as you mentioned, the Medtronics of the world. But then if they try to adapt it to a different division or a different use case, it's almost impossible. It's so rigid and breakable that it rarely happens. So you need to choose an infrastructure and build it in a way that is very flexible and adaptable. Otherwise, also for big companies, it will be a very big challenge to transform and to improve.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, there's a boatload of other topics that we could take in, and we're coming up to the end of the call. There were some questions that were asked that we won't be able to get to, but we'll follow up quickly. Plus, also, just for anybody on the call, if there's more information, there was some question about some of the specific reference points and examples that Daniel brought up earlier. Please reach out to either of the two info lines, basically, and we'll pull together a discussion. But let's do that, and then from there, we'll gladly fill up. But thank you very much for coming. I'm going to hand it back to Sonia as she does a little housekeeping relative to next steps and the like. But thank you, everybody, for being here.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Daniel, Adam, and John, and everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from XTalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. I will share a link to view the recording of today's event in the chat box, which you can also share with your colleagues so they may register for the recording here as well. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve on our further webinars. So I encourage you to do that. Now, please join us in thanking our speakers for their time here today, Daniel, Adam, and of course my co-moderator, John. We hope you found this webinar informative. It has been my pleasure to be your webinar moderator. On behalf of the team here at XTalks, we thank you for joining us. I'm Sonia Hunt. Until next time, please take care and bye for now. Bye, everyone.